So, Guru Maharaj, do you hear me?
Yes, I see you
Yes.
well.
Yes, I'm happy to see you back with us. So my question goes like this. Can you speak a little bit about a sadhaka seeing his potential? How does this look like? Because for me, practically, when one tries to engage in bhakti and in service, the more you try to engage in service, the more you feel that it's never enough. And this can sometimes, I don't know, like have some tamastic or false ego influence on our motivation, because you feel it's never enough, and you that humbles you, which is nice. But sometimes I can get demotivated in some moments. So my question is, how can one like, what does it mean? How can one take a glimpse of his potential and respectively be a little bit more motivated to continue when you feel that it's never enough, and like no progress is coming?
Thank you for your question. It's a bit of a psychological question, I believe. Fair enough. But I have always thought of and looked at my guru as an example of my potential coming before me. All that I could be and what I should aspire towards and so forth. And it's a very interesting phenomenon that in touch with him and with our guru, I think we feel our potential, which is unlimited and extraordinary, and at the same time we feel very humbled and unqualified. It's two contradictory feelings, if you will. So we're humbled by the latter and encouraged by the former. And both things are good. I mean, it's good to feel humble and to know that the ideal is very high and lofty and so forth, and then to feel blessed at the same time that the opportunity has come to us despite our lack of qualification, and in such a user-friendly form, if you will, because obviously the guru of our choice is going to be one that largely, if we listen and pay attention as we should before choosing a guru, someone whose disposition is resonates with us, and his or her example and way of speaking about the tradition and so on and so forth. So I like to also look at the guru as not an artificial kind of imposition. It's said in the scriptures, Tasmat Guru, but what is that verse? Vigyanartam Saguru Meva Bigachet. One must have a guru. I always looked at that not as a law, that one must have a guru, which is a little ominous, for at least for the Western mind. But I must have a guru, that I'm so inspired by such a person that I must have him or her as my guru. Somehow or other, I must make that that connection. Excuse me. Which again, according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, is the God in the heart, if you will, coming before us in form that resonates with our own heart, our own sensibilities, and so forth. So I think that that is a very practical way to look at our potential coming before us, all that we can be, and that's encouraging. And at the same time, such a person, the guru figure, is very, very generous, very patient with us, and feels confident to a large extent if we are, on the path, so to speak. Our own perspective is a little bit close up, whereas the guru's perspective is a little bit distant, seeing a larger picture. So if you want to go, for example, to the highest peak of the Himalaya, the snow-capped mountain range, then you're going to traverse, if you can see my hand, like this. You're going to go up through the foothills and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So we see ourselves go up a little and we see ourselves going down. And we kind of emphasize the down part. I think it gets the better of us at times. But we don't see the larger picture that as we're going down, we're actually going up. You understand? And so it's good if we can kind of come into that bigger picture and not let the downside, if you will, be discouraging, or the glaring shortcomings of ourselves on our part that we are obvious in comparison to the ideal. But I don't think that you say that you sometimes feel that it's never enough. I would say there can always be more, but but even a little bit is extraordinary. With regard to association, we hear that just a moment's association can change the course of our life. So again, it's important to kind of like look at the bigger picture. Another example of this was that one day one of my godbrothers sat with us on the veranda of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, as we used to do, for a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the evening, asking him questions and hearing his answers, and in the context of hearing his answers, forgetting about our questions, and as he took us to new heights and so forth. And one of my godbrothers announced one day that today is a very nice, inauspicious day. And Guru Maharaj said, "Really? What happened? What's the reason for that?" And I said, "Well, today is my birthday. So I took birth as in a material body." And Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj said, "Oh no, that's an auspicious day, because in this birth you got a human birth. Jalaja Nabalakshani Stavarlakshabimshati." Quoted this verse from the Purana. There are so many species of aquatics and reptiles, and so many, and amongst them there are 400,000 types of human beings, which the rarest type. And you have human life. That's very auspicious. And you have this connection with the Sadguru. As Govinda Das says, Dulabha Manava Janama Satsange Taraha E Bhava Sindhure. Dulabha Manava. Again, the human life, Manava is Dulabha, very rare. Dulabha Manava Janama. If you have a birth, Janama, in a human life, it's very rare. And if you have, along with that, Satsanga, association with real saints, then Taraha E Bhava, you have Bhava Sindhure. You have all you need to cross over the ocean of material existence. There's a kind of ashabandha. Ashabandha is a symptom of bhava, which means kind of like hope beyond hope, where there is no hope in myself. I can look at myself and say, there's no hope here. But another hope arises nonetheless. What is that hope? Hope arises, and it's a very powerful hope, that understanding the nature of Krishna, what is he like? Despite the fact I see no hope in myself, given my shortcomings. His nature is to overlook, right? His nature is so generous. The very learned Uddhava, who was Shastravit, he knew everything in the Shastra. He made a statement that Aho Bhaktiyam Stanakalakutam, who in the right mind would take shelter of anybody other than Krishna, who gave motherhood, eternal motherhood, in relation to himself, to Putana, who simply dressed herself as a devotee. with the very evil intentions. He ignored the evil intentions and dealt with them appropriately given the circumstance, but gave her motherhood. So he said, who in their right mind would take shelter of anybody else? There's no other divinity in the Hindu pantheon that, if you will, that looms so large in terms of generosity and humility, and mercy and so forth. So you kind of have to put those things together. I wouldn't feel discouraged with the idea that it's never enough. I would think that we do have to be sensible about our limitations, and that is part of the the art of sadhana. This is like anything; it's a practice. So it's not to be done blindly. It's to be done with some awareness of my limitations, and we don't need to emphasize them. They're apparent, and from our level of eligibility, we give as much as we're capable of, and always try to and I should say, naturally we will progress. Naturally we will progress and find ourselves able to engage in ways that previously we were not, like with more attentive hearing and chanting, and producing a result which generates kind of a spontaneity and an enthusiasm and so forth. So don't beat yourself up, I would say, and try to look, at the bigger picture, which certainly I'm looking at and Krishna's looking at. So does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. It really does. Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
Okay, the next one is from Amrita Gopal from Brighton.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'd love if you'd elucidate on two verses that I found in the Bhagavatam, and the nature of the verses are about the friendship between devotees. Vasudeva is glorifying Sri Nara Muni. There are a few words that I would be grateful if you could clarify. Sneha Sangitaha, and that verse is 10:84-61. Sri Vasudeva said, "My dear brother, God himself has tied the knot called affection, sneha, which tightly binds human beings together. It seems to me that even great heroes and mystics find it very difficult to free themselves from it." So I'd love to hear you on that verse in terms of the affection, that's sneha, sangitaha. And then the following verse, "Indeed, the Supreme Lord must have created the bonds of affection, for such exalted saints as you have never stopped showing matchless friendship toward us ingrates, although it has never been properly reciprocated." So in terms of the follow-up question, I'd be very grateful if you would kindly speak about the nature of the friendship between Vaishnavas and how we can avoid the terrible situation of improperly or not reciprocating properly.
Well, the knot of affection to that which doesn't endure is, to use Schopenhauer's term, the world knot, if you will. And to untie that is kind of the ABCs of spiritual life. In the Gyan Marg, they try to do so very directly by way of renunciation. So if you're attached to that which is temporary, then and moving in relation to things that are temporary in pursuit of enduring happiness, that's a Kali. So they stop moving in relation to temporary things, and indeed accept processes or methods for overcoming such attachment and affections, if you will, that are extreme. That is the kind of direct approach. They try to untie the knot, the Gordian knot, if you will, of material existence. And that's a very, 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 very tight knot. as the verses in Bhagavatam you're citing tell us. So to take it upon yourself to untie that knot directly, that is very difficult. Krishna says about that in the Gita. What he says that good luck. Says he says that that's not possible. Mama Maya Duratyaya. My Maya is Duratyaya. That knot is not possible to untie on the strength of your own efforts. Now, if the jnani factors in some bhakti, then it can be untied. But of course, the implication of that is that, well, why not just do bhakti then? Wherein there is a lot of effort, but the effort is to get grace. It's a very different kind of effort. We make an effort to try to get grace and get a strength that beyond our own to deal with the situation. And this is very common sense. Bhakti is thought to be by the Advaitins to be emotional rather than intellectual, but actually it's common sense. It eludes often even very intelligent people. And so, to give an example, I cited the Gaudiya knot. The Gaudiya knot was this big knot that I think it must have been tied in Greece, and it said whoever can undo the Gordian knot will become the conqueror of the lands beyond, which was India. So many great Greek warriors tried to untie the knot, right? And they were unsuccessful. And they were very young at that time. Alexander said, "I can do it," and everybody laughed at him. And he came up and pulled out his sword and undid the knot by cutting it with a sword instead of trying to undo the thing. And of course, he conquered India. Columbus, in another example, it was said, whoever can stand an egg on its head without it falling over will be able to cross the ocean, which was to say, it's impossible to cross the ocean. It's flat, No, how can try to take an egg and stand it up without it falling over? It's impossible. But Columbus said, "I can do it." So they said, "Okay, let's see you try." So he took the egg and he went like that, and made a little dent in the bottom of it, and then stood it up. So he crossed the ocean. So this is the kind of common sense of bhakti, relation to the very word in the text that you cited, affection, central to your question. As I said, the jnanis try to overcome affection by detachment, and vairagya or detachment is an anga or a limb of the path of the Gyan Marg, but it's not a limb of the path of bhakti. Gyan and vairagya, they go together. Knowledge corresponds with detachment. In other words, if you have knowledge, you don't pursue things that are temporary. You don't have attachment for things that are temporary if you're in knowledge, right? Because why we pursue things is to be happy forever, and if the things are temporary, well, that's a recipe for failure, right? So Gyan and Vairagya. And what does the Bhagavatam say? Gyani atu vashiva. Gyani atu ashu vairagyam gyanam charivaitukam. Vasudeve bhagavati bhakti yoga prayojita. Gyani atu ashu vairagyam gyanam cha yad aitukam. So in the context of bhakti, knowledge and renunciation come automatically as a byproduct. Similarly, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when Rupa Goswami is giving the different angas or limbs of the angi or the body of bhakti, he says Gyan and Vairagya are not limbs of bhakti, whereas they are limbs of the Gyan Marg. So how then do we become detached from the bonds of material affection? Well, we do that by another kind of attachment, right? How do we stop and override or do away with the enjoying and exploiting spirit? We replace it with the serving and dedicating spirit, which is the antithesis of it, right? So how do we don't advance in bhakti by vairagya. Vairagya is a symptom of our advancement that comes from overtly, at least, the opposite of vairagya, which is attachment to Krishna, and attachment to Krishna's devotees. Again, while the jnanis try to overcome attachment by vairagya, we don't progress by vairagya. It's a byproduct of our progress, which comes from attachment. So we transfer the very tendency, if you will, for or the momentum that we have since time immemorial of attachment to the temporary. We transfer it to that which is eternal object of love. And while that is Krishna, of course, it includes his devotees, because there's no meaning to Krishna without his devotees. There's no meaning to an object of love without the love itself. You need both. The devotee is the embodiment of the love, and Krishna is the object of love. This is a Chinta Bheda Bheda. They're one, and they're different at the same time, right? So, by sanga, we accomplish vairagya, which sounds like contradictory, because vairagya means to do away with sanga. In jnana and in yoga, you can't have any friends. No friends allowed. Tell that to your friends. No friends allowed in yoga marg, in jnana marg, no. But in bhakti, then the more the merrier, right? Right? The more friends you can have, the better. Now, of course, there's an art to associating with devotees, and that involves determining the level of their advancement and how we will relate with them. So if they're not as advanced as us, then we'll relate with them in a particular way, trying to help them, right? Showing them a good example, being compassionate, patient with them, and so forth. If there are peers or contemporaries, peers of ours, then you have a more intimate exchange of experiences and so forth that we can share. And of course, if they're superior to us in their advancement and progress, then we want to serve them and hear from them. It's the basic idea. And in this way, real attachment to devotees unravels the bond or the knot of material affection. And at the same time, of course, we are devotees kind of in progress. So we have to be careful that in the name of sadhu sanga, we're not just really having ordinary sanga, right? So everything I'm saying here is relative to how much someone is a devotee, and how much we relate to that side of them, right? So even a neophyte devotee is somewhat of a devotee, right? And it's that side of them that we have to associate with and reciprocate with, and so on and so forth, right? To make that sangha holy and productive of the detachment from again ordinary life, or that which is not going to endure. I mean, we have a personality that's not going to endure. That's just a fact. So how much am I interested in that? Not that interested. Should I be? Only as much as, well, you have to be interested in it, to deal with it, to work with it in terms of replacing it, if you will, retiring it, your material personality, dispositions, and so forth, retiring it and replacing it with a spiritual personality and so forth. So there's an art, to that association. But I mean, overall, that said, your question is about how to, if I remembered correctly, how to interact with affectionately, snigdasya, with devotees, and not lack affection or not reciprocate appropriately, and so on and so forth. And I think it's just kind of common sense, how to do that. We want to, and again, I wouldn't get too let's say, for example, you think, well, this devotee is really helping me, and how can I show my affection? I'm not doing enough, and get a little bit neurotic about that. I wouldn't, I wouldn't let that, get the best of you and so forth. So, I'm not sure exactly, what it is that, the verses perhaps, what practically brings, to your mind the question of how I can properly honor my relationship with different devotees and be effective therein and not be defective. You have to also consider the fact that devotees are human beings. They have a human side, as I've said, and there may be things about certain devotees that you don't like. That's just a reality. They're people. There are other devotees who you will like more, who have a more disposition, more like yours. So you're going to, yourself, in the context of associating with devotees, gravitate toward associating with devotees who have more like-mindedness with you. The fact that you don't have a like-mindedness with others, it's just a reality. It doesn't mean there's some defect now. Oh, I should have a like mind with them as much as I do with other devotees who I obviously have a like mind with. And if I'm not having a like mind with all of them, must be some defect. And I'm kind of groping at what you might be thinking, or might come up in someone's mind relative to your question. And I think that it's important to emphasize that we may love every devotee, but we may not like every devotee. It's possible, but we love them for their service. And I often say that if you want to love every devotee and respect every devotee as we should, the answer to that, the solution to that is getting the right distance from everybody. So if somebody's like all the way across the ocean, and they're doing devotional service, we can honor them. But if they're too close, there are other issues, that are non-devotional, may come up and be an affront to us and so forth, and make it difficult to appreciate them. So you need to create enough distance. So there's a little art, to that. But try to, associate with like-minded devotees. There you will thrive. Snigdasya, sajatiya. Sajatiya means like same caste, same temperament, from Brighton, whatever, whatever may be the case. Excuse me. And you use your human sensibilities. After all, Krishna consciousness is human-like, right? If you study the Leela of Krishna, we resonate with it so much because it's so human-like, and Krishna does things that are just like things we know that we do. He has thoughts just like we do as human beings, and we bond with them. So there's a lot of humanness to understanding how to conduct ourselves within Krishna consciousness as well. So, in regard to relationship with others and so forth, a lot of that you would do ordinarily with ordinary persons in non-devotional circumstances and so forth, how you would conduct yourself would apply as well, I would think, to interacting with devotees. I hope that helps. Okay. Next question.
Okay. Question is from Madhu Mangal from Arkansas. He says, my question has to do with Vaishnava Parad. In my years, I have been guilty, sometimes very guilty, of committing this mad elephant offense. I have put significant effort into trying to locate ones who I have offended and hurt, and have acknowledged my offenses to them, humbly begged their forgiveness, offered service to them, praised their good qualities, and have chanted extra rounds for them. In most cases, we have been able to resolve and put behind us whatever issues we may have had, and they have accepted my apologies and forgiven me, and we have moved on. Some have not, and some have left their bodies. For those who have chosen to not forgive me and accept my truly sincere apologies and efforts to make amends, I leave that between them and Krishna, because I've done what I could. My question is, how do I apologize and make amends to those who are dead? I live with regrets that I was not able to apologize to them and make amends to them before they left their bodies and the planet. And sometimes I feel the guilt of not having done so is interfering with my spiritual progress, because regardless of how long it's been or how much time has passed, the Vaishnava parad, which I'm guilty of committing against them, remains fresh on my mind. Oh, yeah, that's it. That is the question.
One thing about aparad, we can say that there are aparads committed to Vaishnavas in the mind, by words, or by action. And so they can be remedied at the same time by mind, by words, or by action. So if you've committed offenses in your mind, then those offenses can be resolved in the mind by correcting your mind and, catching that I thought like this about this person and I thought like this about this person. I see that that's wrong. I regret that, and so forth. So you resolve the offense in that way. If your offense is verbal, then of course it can be corrected verbally. And if it's physical, then it can be corrected by rendering personal service, for example. And then it also depends on what the level of devotee is. If the devotee is a neophyte or an intermediate or a superlative devotee, then the measure or the degree of the offense will be determined somewhat by that. So if the lightest offense would be a mental offense to a neophyte devotee, the worst offense would be a physical offense to a superlative devotee. So that's one little criterion to keep in mind with regard to offenses. But let's hopefully your offenses were not physical and you didn't, rough somebody up, if you will, or but verbally. Excuse me. It's said that if we want to absolve or resolve such offenses, we can't approach Krishna, we have to approach the devotee. And there's another statement somewhere to the effect that we should approach the dust of the feet of the devotee. And the dust of the feet of a devotee, in the case of, let's say, a guru, is sometimes equated with the guru's disciples. So let's say you offend a guru figure, and the guru figure passes on, and you want to resolve that. Well, while he may not accept offense, Krishna does, and the dust of his feet, his devotees probably harbor also a feeling that you've made an offense. So it can be resolved by speaking with them. Now, in the event that the devotee is not a guru figure and doesn't have disciples, he or she, nonetheless, to extend that idea, certainly has persons who are dear to them, who were dear to them. Let's say you offended someone, the devotee spoke ill with malice of him, and then he passed away, and you want to resolve the offense, and you wonder what to do. You could approach his wife or his children, who, if they knew about it, might hold you responsible. If they didn't know about it, you could inform them, and so forth. And so that's an extended way in which that could, using that formula, you could resolve. Or if the offense was physical, you could render service, give some donation to the family, something to that effect. That might be the case. But I think that aside from that, largely the remorse, the natural and healthy remorse that will come within us, excuse me, or offenses that we acknowledge we're committed, that in itself does much, if not everything, to resolve the issues. Considering that in most cases they're probably mild. They're not like you made a plan to defame this devotee publicly, like we find examples of persons doing in relation to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, and then those devotees getting drastic results from that, and so forth. I don't want to minimize offenses, but I also think that at times they become maximized, and there's a kind of neuroticism that arises in the lives of many devotees about making offenses that probably is unnecessary. And I mean, people think they offend me all the time, and I don't know what they're talking about, So, for example, so that you could factor that in as well. Those are some thoughts I hope will help. And of course, besides that, you're worried that you can't resolve it in this life. If nothing I've said works, well, you'll probably be around for another life too. So will they, I would imagine, some of them. But if they're exalted enough that won't be the case, then they have followers, they have friends, and so forth. And as they say, you can approach them. Let's say you offended Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, God forgive, but let's say you have, what to do? Well, he's gone. Many devotees are, unfortunately, in Iskcon were implicated in that, and some of them directly responsible for that. So what to do? Well, obviously they can approach those devotees who are his followers, and I know for myself that if someone had offended Sridhar Maharaj and they came to me and said they really felt bad about it, they want to apologize, I would certainly think that they, absolve them in my own mind, and that extension of Sridhar Maharaj, in this case. So again, I'm underscoring that point. That may be helpful. So what else? Another question?
Shamsundar had a follow-up. He was asking. Shamsundar is asking for, I think it was a follow-up to the last answer you gave. How would you define spiritual personality?
Well, people are defined by their measure of their faith as either Kanishtam, Madhyam, or Uttam. And the faith shows up in the form of a practical expression of that we call Sharanagati. So to the extent that they are Sharanagata, then and exhibiting those qualities, there are 6 limbs to Sharanagati. This is a gauge to help us understand the spiritual reality of a sadhaka who is like a work in progress. It's partly a material personality, partly a spiritual personality. So you have to be a little familiar with the teaching and whatnot to be able to determine to what extent someone is driven and motivated by their material condition for its furtherance, and the extent to which they're driven in pursuit of their spiritual progress, even which can include even utilizing their material, if you will, propensities and momentum in the opposite direction. It's kind of a hard question to answer as you placed it, but that's the best I can do in brief.
Thank you. And then Sri Radha had a follow-up question from Brighton on the Amrita Gopal's question.
Sorry, I don't think on Amrita Gopal's question, was it on the
Oh, it's just to do with the previous, yeah. Hare Krishna.
Yes, your question.
Hare Krishna, Tripurari Swami. Good to see you, actually. We missed you last week. And you've got a cold, lots of honey and lemon.
Okay, thank you.
What I was going to say was, talking about the previous question about forgiveness when somebody's passed on, I was taught this long time ago that we can bring that person who's passed on into our consciousness and see them in front of us and just talk to them and speak with them and say, I'm asking your forgiveness, and pay our obeisances to them, and sort of have that kind of reciprocation that way, and then bless them and just ask Krishna if he could bless that meeting. Is that possible to do that?
That's a good idea. You can get a picture of them. Put it on your altar. for a day. Yes, that may be helpful. So thank you for adding that.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Next question.
Yeah, the next question is from Anadi Krishna from Poland. He says, my question is, concerns the processes of self-realization for individual yugas.
For individual users?
No, yugas, like, you know, the different processes. Yeah. He says, we're very lucky because of being born in the age of Lord Chaitanya, and we have the opportunity to develop Vraja-bhakti. But I wonder if in other yugas, there is any opportunity for jivas to develop this kind of bhakti.
Yeah, there's possibility. The example is there of the sages of Dandakaranya and the personified Upanishads who, through the Gopal mantra, which is an Upanishadic mantra that precedes the age of Kali, if you will, as it is explained and revealed in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad. So via that mantra, they attained Gopi Bhav. That example is there in the Bhagavatam. They are the gopis who could not come at night when Krishna played the flute. Excuse me, their husbands checked them. And that checking of them created a separation in the context of the prakat, or the manifest lila, that caused their bhava to intensify to the point where later they could participate, as shown, I think, in maybe the 42nd or 46th chapter through the commentaries, that there they gained the eligibility that is derived in the context of the prakat lila, the intensification of their prem through sneha, man, pranay, rag, anurag, mahabhav. So yeah, it's possible. There are examples of Rupa Goswami gives an example of someone from a previous yuga attaining Vatsalya Bhakti, entered the Prakat Leela, and in the context of Brahma Vimohan Leela, perfected their Vatsalya when Krishna became their son. And there are examples of Sakya Bhava also. So, you know, again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not starting something that never, didn't exist. What the contribution of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was kind of opening the gates of Goloka, and making access much more readily available in the context of Krishna himself trying to explore what appear to be the limits of the Braj Leela, that he goes beyond, by manifesting the Gaur-lila. Limits for tasting rasa on his part. He's Rasa Raj. So he found limitations and he dealt with them by extending the Leela into what we call Gaur-lila, which is Krishna Leela itself, and tasted the Mahabhav of Radha. And so in the context of doing that, it's become available to everyone. And the best place to do that is in human society, to film it on location, if you will. So the Prakat Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's internal absorption results in a special dispensation to the public. It becomes secrets of this most secret of secrets of Braj becomes known the world over. So Kali-yuga is special. And that said, I don't know much about the other yugas, and I'm not too much concerned about the other yugas. And so I'm not diminishing the importance of your question, but I have been asked questions about yugas and so on and so forth in the past, and that's my basic response. But there are examples, of course, and this is not a new thing. No, it is available. Next question.
Okay, the next question, or possibly a series of questions, is from Dvija Gauranga Prabhu from Vancouver.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. Nice to see you. I reside in Iskcon, Vancouver, and I was approached by someone who's in the sanga with some, questions that I'm sure you've covered in past. I've heard various aspects in past. I've done my best to answer the questions, but I suggested perhaps we can ask you directly here. And either you can refer us to somewhere where you've already actively answered these questions, or perhaps you might want to say something now. It's basic questions about Guru and Iskcon. First question would be, in your opinion, are Iskcon gurus bona fide? And if so, why? Or if not, why not? Are ritvik gurus bona fide? What is the connecting point that they rely on? There's the argument about the living guru. And I guess that's good enough to start with. If that's
good enough to start with, yeah. So are Iskcon gurus bona fide? I'm not an Iskcon because Iskcon many years ago developed a policy that briefly stated was that if you were to take Siksha, excuse me, outside of Iskcon, you could not be a member. It was directed at Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, who at the time was giving Siksha to Iskcon devotees as per Prabhupada's suggestion that they could take Siksha from Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. I was massaging Prabhupada's feet in Vrindavan when he was asked the question if there was anybody we could consult with after his departure. He said for philosophy, my godbrother B.R. Sridhar Maharaj of Navadvip. So that's how that all began. Prabhupada obviously opened the door to that, but later the administrative leaders of Iskcon closed the door to that, and it was a short-sighted, to put it mildly, a decision on their part that I think was motivated by mixed motivations, the desire to keep the society pure without being pure enough to understand how one's own motivation could get in the way of thinking, what's pure. So anyway, that's a long story in itself. But as a result of that, I was faced with the problem of, Prabhupada wanted us to follow the GBC, which was a managerial body managing Iskcon and so forth. On the one hand, on the other hand, the GBC expected me to have a policy towards Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, which would have been offensive in my mind, because while they said no one should take Siksha outside of Iskcon, they were simultaneously vilifying Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj from the Asasans around the world. So I didn't want to be part of that. So I made my choice, and those days were very, they were different than today. When I left Iskcon, it was not very porous, if you will. The walls were pretty solid and so forth. Now there are all kind of holes in the walls. People come in and out and so on and so forth. I've been distanced from Iskcon. I try not to be critical of Iskcon outside of that constructive criticism that has its place. And it's a large organization, and it does a lot of good for a lot of people, I would say, on a certain level. They've evolved at the same time a certain policy with regard to the Guru that is a little foreign to me. It's a pragmatic kind of a posture, that the position that they've taken, that in my mind does not concur, if you will, with scripture and in ways, important and significant ways, minimize the position of the Guru. And I think that it's a pragmatic posture that they've taken with a view to preserve an institution. And in my own opinion, unity, if you will, of a group, it's only as good as if it's unity for the right thing. I mean, Nazi Germany was unified too. So, and I'm not saying that Iskcon is a incarnation of the Third Reich or something like that. So, so I think it's a little misplaced, if you will, and it has problems, and so it plays out something like, which kind of starts to take us into your second question, a quasi-ritvik kind of arrangement where the GBC is actually the ultimate spiritual authority, and the gurus are subordinate to the GBC. Therefore, if the guru leaves, that's not a problem. I mean, that's the kind of the teaching. because you've got the GBC, and the GBC as a collective group, they represent Prabhupada. And so these ideas, I think, are ways of trying to make up for spiritual shortcomings that don't make up for them. Philosophically, they may practically on some level to some extent, but whether they can really deliver the goods is kind of what your question is. And so are the gurus bona fide? I don't think that the system is right. It's kind of a covert ritvik system, but now the question is, again, the question is, are the gurus bona fide? Well, I'd say that, like, on some level they're quite good at helping devotees, and they're not all the same either. There are members of Iskcon that understand what I'm saying and don't agree with the policy of the institution and function in their own little circle, if you will, differently. And Iskcon's big enough that you can do that now, so to speak. But in order to preserve the group and so forth, that they stay within it, and so they teach their disciples that I'm your guru, the GBC is not your guru. I don't know if they actually come out and say that. I think that they, and I'm not a member, but I think I was told recently that they have a policy where you give initiation, you have to tell people that they pledge allegiance to the Iskcon society and so on. So all that stuff's kind of problematic to me. Some people, as I say, they kind of stay between the lines and try to work it out, and they're a little more philosophically astute and see the problems, but they're not radical enough to bring it out directly, and which would result in perhaps in their having to leave the group. And so it's a complex situation, and I can't make a statement that everybody's bona fide, everybody's unbona fide. I think everybody's bona fide to some extent, and they can help to some extent. And there may be a place for that. Something's better than nothing. So
I think the crux of the question is by this person is, I want to find someone who's going to take me back to Godhead. Can these people do it? And that's why I suggested let's go on here and speak with you, because I consider you of that category.
Well, I think that the answer to the question is not something that's going to come from me. Whether this person or that person can take you back to God. I may think he can't. You may think he can't. It's better to go with what you think. And if you find out otherwise, well, then you grow from there. I can't make the decision for you, So can these persons take me back to God? Well, look at them. There's 100 of them, 108 of them, or 208 of them. I don't know how many gurus to have in Iskcon. You can examine them all and so forth. And I would, but it seems that if you have a doubt about that, then why limit your search for such to an institution that brings up the doubt, to begin with, when you don't have to? There are other institutions, there are other players in the market, and let the market decide here. It's a market of faith, right?
Yeah.
So wherever your faith can be captured, there you should go. And of course,
there's some concern because of the geographical location that this person will have the sanga primarily of Iskcon people, and therefore going outside may bring the castigation or the criticism of that group.
Yeah, that's a practical concern. I think that that your faith in a particular individual as a guru has to override practical obstacles like that. Just like it's on another level, but just like, well, you have faith in a spiritual ideal, and your parents or your family or your friends don't, and so you're going to have to separate from them. And so it's on another level, obviously, and you may, for that matter, be getting some nourishment from that community that to some extent you'll be ostracized from should you take initiation outside of it. And you have to balance that out. Now, the fact of the matter is, in this regard, practically speaking, that all these different little Iskcon communities here, there, and everywhere, which they are different. And if you're a member of such a community and they like you and so forth, and you take initiation from someone outside of Iskcon, they might be a little disappointed, but then again, they want people around, they want your help. So they probably will, let's not talk about it kind of thing, in at least, and not change, and your situation won't change. Now, you have to also understand that in that situation, you're getting some benefit from that association, but you're also, and more substantially, getting benefit from the guru figure who's outside of Iskcon in terms of his or her siksha and so forth. And he or she has a community. It may not be geographically where you are, but I mean, these days, geographical locations are quickly becoming replaced with whatever digital, what would you call it, locations, right? Virtual locations, and so I think that there's a gain there, and the gain will become more substantial if you follow your convictions and your faith. The gain that you will get will become more substantial than you realize, and make up for whatever extent the community doesn't quite agree with you, doesn't like you, or even excommunicates you, which is that's an extreme, which is probably very unlikely these days. Because I have experience. I have students like this around the world who are affiliated with Iskcon, Alaska, or whatever, or Siberia, and I'm not there, and so forth. And I found for the most part these days that the lines in the sand are not, so drawn so firmly.
Very nice.
Does that help?
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we've covered most of that, and it's time for the end of the call. Is there anything else you would like to ask about that I can help with at the moment? Any other comment? Or the ritvik thing is another thing. That's a whole other thing. Ritvik thing is okay. They're going outside of Iskcon. They can thrive even within Iskcon to some extent. Ritviks, because it's a quasi-ritvik system that they've developed. But the ritvik idea is like, okay, there's a problem as they see it in the succession, and they've come up with a solution. Their solution is to not allow the succession to go forward, but to freeze it with Prabhupada. But in the Gita, Krishna says, when there's a problem with the succession, evam parampara praptam, the solution is the succession. The solution is not to stop the succession. The solution, yoga nashta parantapa, when the teachings become distorted, the solution is parampara. So what would Prabhupada say? Well, that's what I would say now. That's what I would tell my disciples. But Prabhupada would say this. That's Guru Parampara. And, if we should follow our faith in that regard, Krishna says that he keeps it alive. And that's his system, one after another. That's what Parampara means. And where it will happen, where it will come up, who can say, right? We should be prepared to go there, though.
Great.
Jai.
Wonderful.
Vancouver Iskcon ki jai. Okay. So nice to talk with you all. Out of time. Excuse me. I hope to be with you again next week. Go Premanande. Go Bhaktabinda ki jai. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
So I forgot to prep for this, so I can't remember who's giving class next Thursday, but you should have the email that says it all. So I hope you'll log in next. Oh, actually, Mara Mohan's going to say it.
I think it's Shamasundar.
Okay, good. Shyam Sundar.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's just put in the comment there.
Excellent. Sounds good. What was that?
Happy birthday to Shamasundar from me. I think.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday.
Birthday, Krishna birthday.
Excellent. Well, that's all the things I got to say today, and I hope to see all you. I hope I'll see you all next week. Haribol.
May I just say something to you?
Of course.
Please take care of Tripurari. He needs ginger, honey, and lemon. As a mother, a humble mother would say, don't let him talk anymore. Let him rest, massage with Vic, and make him better.
Very good. Thanks so much. You got to send me the ratio because I don't know anything about what the ginger honey ratio is.
Ginger, ask somebody who knows.
Okay. See you next
And you
week.
get well soon too, Gurunishna.
Thank you. I'll try. I'll take the remnants of Guru Maharaj's ginger honey.